Hello, what's going on? How you doing? Welcome to a special edition of What's Next with WongDoody. I'm Xavier Jernigan. My friends call me X, and I'm honored to be here today representing Black Heritage Month or Black History Month, whichever you prefer, and being here as your host and moderator. I'm the voice of Spotify. That was just announced yesterday. I'm literally the voice of Spotify and app. But I also have a full-time job at Spotify as full-time talent. I'm a creator myself, and I'm an executive. I'm the head of cultural partnerships. So I'm excited to be here with you. We got a lot to talk about. And this is the thing. I'm gonna give you some ground rules. We're gonna have real talk. Today is about real talk. It's about our experiences as Black people. The stars are the people who are on the panel, not the moderator. So all I'm going to do is guide a discussion with some of your wonderful colleagues, and I'm just truly excited to be here and to hear from them. And I'm going to pull the curtain back a little bit. We had a couple of meetings just to talk about what the discussion would feel like and what it would sound like. And I'm telling you, we was having church up in there. It was like a therapy session, and that's what this is going to be. Is real talk about our experiences as Black people in this world, across the diaspora, and in the corporate environments and things that we face. And we're going to be real about it. We're going to talk about these challenges. The official title for this panel is The Legacy of the Civil Rights Movement, a driving force for personal and professional action. The US Civil Rights Movement was the catalyst for much global change, as you all know. The impact of these past events, they've shaped us. They've shaped our present reality, and they continue to inform the future that we're currently building. Now, right here with WongDoody's Black ERG, we're going to have that conversation. We're going to carry on the soul of the civil rights movement. What does that look like today? How do we live that out in our professional and personal lives and our creative lives? I'm a creator. You all are creatives. And we're going to talk about that, how it relates to technology, culture, and the media. And I'm going to give you a taste of what I mean by that. I'm going to bring it home and bring it back down to earth. Me being the voice of Spotify, for example. What does it mean for a Black man to voice the biggest audio app on the planet with 500 million users? What does that mean? We know what the voice of tech have sounded like in Alexa and Siri and Google Home. They've sounded like robotic white women. Now, what is a hyper-realistic voice of a Black man who embraces all aspects of me being Black? I'm an HBCU graduate, proud representative. I grew up in an HBCU town. So I'm Black from the South that migrated up to Brooklyn, New York. So what does that look like to have me representing technology like that? That's what we're talking about. So I want to introduce my panelists without any further ado. Shout out to Pierre, Kobe, Ella, Rivka, and Jacqueline. And what I want you all to do, I want you to introduce yourselves. You can tell your story better than anybody else. So I want you to say your name, your title, where you're from, what flavor of Black are you? What part of the diaspora are you from? But I want to hear about that. Let's start there, and let's start with the homie Pierre. Welcome.
Hey, thanks, X. I really appreciate it. I'm Pierre Michel. I'm a senior visual designer. I've been with WongDoody for about 5 months now, and I've been in the industry for a decade. And my background is I'm from Haiti. I'm from the Caribbean. Sac passe to all my Haitians
Yes.
out. And I'm looking forward to the next decade to see what this industry will bring my way.
Thank you, Pierre. Kobe.
Hi, I'm Kobe Jackson. I'm a senior copy editor and copywriter here at WongDoody, and I've actually been at WongDoody for 16 years. So,
OG.
Yeah, so that means I started when I was a 9-year-old boy, just to let you know. But my family has deep roots in the South and the Southwest. So my grandfather from Mississippi, and my grandmother's from Texas and Oklahoma, and they were part of that big Great Migration that came out to California. So I'm a native Californian. So there's all different kinds of flavors of American Blackness in my family that get represented in who I am and what I do and how I create.
Beautiful. Ella.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emanuela Ginica Ebnilo, but I go by Ella. I am from originally from Adazinuku in Anambra State, Nigeria. So I am African. That is where my cultural heritage lies. I'm a strategist at WongDoody. I've been here for almost 2 years now. Just excited to have this conversation with you all.
Love that painting, by the way.
Thank you.
Rivka.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rivka Simmons. I am the Associate of Resource Management here at WongDoody. Been here almost a year now, around 9 months. I am someone with Caribbean heritage as well. My family is from the small island of Trinidad and Tobago, and we migrated here, well, they did, and so I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. So shout out to Brooklyn.
Yeah, Brooklyn in the building. Jacqueline.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Gellner. I am the AVP of Marketing at WongDoody. I'm based in Los Angeles, originally from the DC area, but I like to give, honor my Seychellois heritage, whereas my mom is from. My dad is white. I'll be honest, I felt a little weird taking up space on this call because of that, but I am so grateful to this group who have made me feel so welcome. And I'm just so excited to have this conversation with all of you today.
The beauty is that it's all part of the diaspora. It's all we all got a mix of something in us. Like, I'm from Daytona Beach, Florida, born and raised. I've been in Brooklyn, New York City half my life now. I went to school at Florida A&M University, and then I also went to NYU. And my mom's from rural Alabama. She grew up on a farm, youngest of 10 kids, and then she went to Daytona Beach, and that's where I was born and raised, with an older brother who's married with 3 kids and lives in Toledo, Ohio. So we all come from different places. It's all relevant. It all matters. And Jacqueline, there's somebody who has an experience that you have. And sometimes people feel like, I don't know if I fully belong. You belong here. And that's why you're here. And we wouldn't even be doing this if it wasn't for you. I got a public service announcement. Hey, y'all, we made a banging playlist. A banging playlist. I work with Spotify. I just added like 6 joints and I had to pull back. But the whole ERG added just different songs about the Black experience, or just what moves them and what feels good. So check that out. It's going to be dropped in the chat. Jacqueline is going to drop it there. It's also going to be embedded on the website. I think it's already there. So do that and ask questions. Any questions you have about anything that we're talking about, any comments you have, drop them in and we will get to them at the end, or we may weave them in along the way. But this is a discussion for all of us, and I'm ready to just dive on in. And as we saw from the introductions, we're all from different places. We represent a different mix of cultures that ladder up to what Blackness is. But when we're born, we don't automatically understand the concept of being Black. What does that mean exactly? It's a concept that's taught. It's a concept that's reinforced by society. So I want to ask you all, what is your earliest memory of being Black? When did you start identifying with being Black, and how has that memory shaped you? And we can start with Pierre, but we can hop around. Y'all don't have to wait for me to call on you. You can hop around, but I want to get to everybody. So as you feel moved by the spirit, jump on in, but this is where the conversation begins. But I want to start with Pierre and kick it off.
Yeah, for me, coming from Haiti, I came to this country when I was about 10, 11 years old. Coming from Haiti, like, everybody's Black. President is Black, teacher is Black. Yeah. You go to the supermarket, everybody's Black. So it wasn't never a thing for me, because I felt like I belong, and that wasn't at the forefront of any conversation.
Yeah.
But when I came to the U.S. and I came to school.
And Pierre, about how old were you when you came to the U.S.?
I came to the U.S. when I was about 11.
Okay.
11 years old. And when I came to school, when I attended school in the U.S., I realized that there was people calling me different names, based on the fact that they know I'm from Haiti.
Right.
They're like, oh, which boat did you came on? I'm like, wait, what? What does that mean?
Right.
So it was always that kind of stuff I had to navigate. And then when I noticed that this was something that actually put me in a category, that's when I realized, oh, wow, being Black here is different.
Right.
In Haiti, like, that's not a thing, because you're surrounded, by your own people, and
right.
Blackness is powerful, it's strong. There's a long history, long lineage to what Blackness means. But in the US, like, it was definitely different.
And I can resonate with, what Pierre just mentioned. speaking as someone who did immigrate to the country as well, I came to the U.S. when I was about 5 years old. And it's that same thing. Like you come from a country where you're surrounded with people who look like you. You come to a country where there are people who look differently from you. And I remember in elementary school as well being asked, like, you're from Africa. Do you guys live in huts? And the response that, like, not necessarily me, like me and my siblings would give, like, no, we don't live in huts. And someone, I remember my brother mentioned that one of his quote unquote friends was like, oh, are your, like, no, we don't live in huts. We live in mansions. And they mentioned, like, are your mansions huts stacked on top of huts? And for me, it was the ignorance of it all. It was kind of a moment that made me realize that, people, there's a difference in perception in regards to like where you're from and then where you come to in a different space. But for me personally, like one of the moments I remember distinctly about, recognizing my Blackness was a moment where I was having a conversation with a young girl when we were younger, and she was saying things that were kind of inappropriate for, I guess, a child to be saying. And I unfortunately decided to repeat those things she said. And then I was the one who got in trouble for it, even though originally it came from her. It was a young Caucasian girl. And for me in that moment, it made me realize that like there's a difference between the things that I can say versus the things that other people can say, and that the consequences for those things.
Powerful memories. Colby, what about you?
When we asked that question about that first memory of being Black, I feel like it's such a deep question because there's different notions of what it means to be Black with regard to like your personal experience and your community and culture versus like what it means to be Black in America and the white spaces. Right. And then just the very idea that Blackness itself is this kind of social construct that doesn't exist, like which is what a couple of other people on the panel are saying. Like if you live in a predominantly a Black country or a predominantly Black space, the idea of what it means to be Black can be a very different thing from living in being in a white or non-Black space. Yeah. And so that experience itself is complex and fraught. I'll just try to be really quick, brief, and say that.
Take your time. We here to talk. Do your thing. Do your thing. We good.
Well, I'll say that my family was Black and I was Black, but I grew up in the Bay Area initially, and so I had like this dual life of Blackness at home, or like being in a Black family where we are all Black, and you don't think about Blackness that much unless it's like some sort of like intentional cultural moment, and then going into a predominantly white space and being othered there.
That's right.
And I've also had like a very interesting experience because we moved around the country for a bit. So in the Bay Area, we were in like predominantly white. I was in predominantly white classrooms that weren't completely white, but they were predominantly white. Moved to the South, this is ironic. Moved to Mississippi. The schools have been integrated by force because of all the stuff that had happened that we all know about. So those were integrated classrooms that were more integrated than the classrooms in the Bay Area that I was in. Then moved to Chicago on the South Side for 2 years, went to the middle school where I think there were 2 white people in the entire school, and they were both teachers. Everybody else was Black. And so it's like a different experience in each of those places, like to be Black in those spaces, to be othered or to not be othered. I'll say one last thing, which is that my grandfather took me on this trip to this form. It's basically a ghost town now. It's called Allensworth in California, Central Valley. And it was this formerly all Black town where, as the story often happens, the powers that be engineer the destruction of the town because there's too much success going on with Black people in one place. And this like story happens in, we know of like Black
also Eatonville. Yeah.
But even though it was a ghost town, there was this annual event where like I think it was during Black History Month where like where we'd all gather, and like it was my first time in so many years just being surrounded by Black people and not, it's just an interesting experience to live in that kind of a world that if you're in America and you're white, you don't have to think about whiteness at all. Yeah. You don't have to think about that. Although it's a fundamental part of your life, you don't have to think about it. It's just, and so like to be in that place where surrounded by Black people and not thinking about Blackness, but just sort of like, I don't know, it's just this really interesting mental space that I entered. And so anyway, I'm going to
It's just like you have to, well, I can relate to that, Cole, because it's like you're hopping in and you're hopping out. You hop back in when you're home and you leave home, and it depended where you lived. I had a similar experience growing up in Daytona Beach, where Daytona Beach is predominantly Black, right? Bethune-Cookman University is there. That's where Mary McLeod Bethune, y'all know the story. She brought, change in her pocket and created this school, and that turned into this HBCU. So I grew up around that, but my elementary was predominantly white with like a decent Black population. But then my junior high was in like the main city limits close to where I lived, and it was the reverse, predominantly Black. Home was blackety Black, you know what I mean? My whole neighborhood, I grew up around all Black people, Black businesses, the whole nine. And then my high school was like my elementary. And then I chose to go to an HBCU where like Pierre and Ella, like I know Ella was a little, like pretty much a baby when she was, in her home country, but like I wanted to go to an HBCU where my school experience, I didn't have to think about my Blackness. I could just be, you know what I mean? And I wanted that experience to like build me up even more. So when I went out into the real world, I would have that. So that's why I'm even rocking this today, my support Black colleges, because it's been that much to my identity. It's meant that much to my identity. Rivka, I want to hear from you, then Jacqueline.
I was gonna say that the experience that Kobe just described was so similar to like parts of my experience as someone who grew up in Brooklyn. Back in the 90s, early 2000s, it was super Black. I mean, I grew up in Heights, and my school was predominantly Black. I didn't have a notion of like what Blackness was that early on, because everything around me was very Black, very Caribbean, very like immigrants, like that was just the vibe, and we celebrated each other so much. It wasn't until like high school, but more so college, when I kind of went away, I started going away to school, where I was like, oh, this is a thing. Like people don't, okay, I heard people, I feel like it was really popular to, be a part of Black culture. It still is.
Mm-hmm.
And I found a lot of like my white colleagues and friends were just trying so hard to kind of like do the thing that was the cool thing, or like connect in ways that like I just kind of found sacred. Like for instance, every Black girl knows your hair. It's just like, we regard that so highly, and like having white women kind of like try to be a part of that in a way that was kind of like not okay at the time for me, I felt like was something that helped me to kind of be like, oh, their experience, they haven't seen us like that, like this, like, or they just haven't had exposure to certain things. So that was something that I was like, just as you kind of navigate college spaces, you learn those things. But for me, being in a space for the first time that wasn't predominantly Black, my high school was Black, everything, it was very much a shock factor of like, okay. So yeah, that was kind of like my first experience. I learned that like, there's a lot of things that you have to do differently, kind of to Ella's point, right? Like you just have to navigate. You can't say what everyone else says. You just have to be extra mindful of certain things that, you kind of, for me, I think it affects different people in different ways, but like it can kind of build resentment to a certain extent if you're not careful. But yeah, that's something that I feel like I learned in college.
Wow. It's funny how much school and our school experiences like are a part of where we learn these things. Socially is a big part of, like, is a really big part of it, but school is a big part of this. Jacqueline.
So this is, a trickier question for me, because identity has always been a confusing thing for me. I think for me, I think I realized again in school when I was younger, when my classmates would see my dad, they would be so confused, like, that's your dad? And so just this sort of recognition that I'm different, that I don't quite look like my peers. And, luckily I grew up in an area that was relatively diverse. I would say mostly white, a lot of Asian and Middle Eastern influence, but there weren't a ton of Black people at my school. There were, I mean, it wasn't, it was diverse, but I do think that just that sort of notion of being different, made me realize that I'm different. I think similar to Ella and Pierre, my mom coming from Seychelles, I've talked a lot to her about race as an adult, and she did not experience race. Like, she didn't know racism was a thing when she was in Seychelles before she moved to the United States. So that was something that she hadn't experienced until coming here. And so I don't think she ever really recognized that she had to have any conversations with me about race. And I think that is just something I observed, unfortunately, through society and my peers at school. And unfortunately, if you've read my article last week, my father, my dad, as I was growing up, really adopted very, very right-wing political views. And that, I internalized those, observing that. And so I think, I think those are sort of the things that sort of made me just realize I'm different. I'm not here nor there. And so where is my place?
I think what you said about your household leads into the second part of our question. I want to hear from the rest of the panel about this. Was there a certain mindset conversations that happen at home about what it means to be Black or what that looks like? Because I know from my first generation friends, what that sounds like at home. Like, it's like from my African friends, my Nigerian and Ghanaian friends, it's like, in this house, we in Africa. Like, this house is Ghana. Out there is the United States. So in here, don't bring that American stuff in this house. Like, I've heard those stories. Same with my Caribbean friends. Like, is Jamaica in this house? Outside. So I want to hear about the conversation about what Blackness was like in your household. For example, for me, we didn't talk about light skin or dark skin and all that. So I didn't even, honestly, I didn't know that was a thing, for example, until I would hear people like maybe valuing like a lighter skinned, person more than a darker skinned person. And this light skinned people in my family, brown skin, darker skin. So I never really, and to this day, cared about that. It's all Black to me, whether it's a mixed race, biracial, whatever. But that was because in my household, it wasn't a thing. And also being from Florida, here's another one for you. I didn't even know about the stereotype that Black people can't swim until I went away to college. And I met people from other parts of the country, and they're like, Black people don't, can't swim. And I was like, what are you talking about? All my friends know how to swim. I'm from Daytona Beach. We all go swimming and hopping in pools and in the ocean. Like, that's just a rite of passage where I'm from. So it's just interesting the things that you're at home. So I want to hear more about that from each of you.
I can take it from here, X. Yeah. So to give you guys context, like in the 90s, there was a lot of political unrest in Haiti, and a lot of Haitians were literally swimming to the U.S. Someone would make makeshift boats, and they try to come in. The Coast Guard will stop them, and some like capsize the boats. Some would die. They'll take them to South Florida, and then hold them for a while, in the worst conditions, and then send them back to Haiti.
Yeah.
So that had a lot to do with how people perceive Haitians, and because that was all over the media. So growing up, my parents were really strict because they wanted us to showcase that we're not that, we're more than what people see on TV. So my dad is a architect by trade. He still does freelance architecture on this side until today. My mother is a retired nurse, and then they're stressed on basically being an educated person, right? And going to college, getting an education, being a hard worker. And also they wanted us to be professionals, right? Because in the Haitian vernacular, when you're in the field, like until somebody can call you professional, you're nothing. So okay, whatever field you go into, make sure you're a professional. I don't know if that makes sense, but they want you to be like they want you to bring honor to the family, right? Family name. So that was always something that was stressed in our family, to me and my little brother. And at first I didn't really understand it. I'm like, well, why are they so strict? But looking back on where it came from and what they had to deal with, they always wanted something better for us. So that's why they actually pressure us, to be great at whatever we do. They always tell us, to be seen in the same light as your non-Black colleagues, you're gonna have to be 1,000 times better to actually get the same, recognition. So I carry that.
Directly say that to you on a regular basis.
Yeah, they will say that to me on a regular basis. Like they will instill that in us, until today, whenever I feel like, I'm gonna take a break from whatever I'm doing, whether it's work or at home. That saying always come back to me. You always have to be 1,000 times better to get the recognition other, like a white colleague would get for being mediocre, right? So that's something actually that influenced, my professional life. And it's something, now I'm a father, I have a 5-month-old. And I think that I'm going to instill the same kind of like a principle, into his life, basically making sure that he knows that, hey, you can't, it's like, there's no room for you to be comfortable. There's no room for you to not want to go the extra mile. You have to push yourself to be better and greater than the rest.
Mm.
Yeah.
At home for me, my mom, what was most important for her was that I see things clearly, that I see the truth of America, like the goodness and the badness of it all. So like she made clear to me like the experiences that my grandfather had had as a World War II veteran who'd gone overseas and fought in Germany and Belgium, and then came back and was spit on, came back to Mississippi and had to leave because he had been treated like a human being over there in Europe, and then was being treated like he wasn't a human being in Mississippi. That was the big reason why he moved to California. And so she wanted me to see all the truth of America, all the truth of the Black experience in America in terms of like all the Black excellence, all the work that we'd done, all the accomplishments that we'd had, but also how on a certain level we were kind of under attack by the culture. And that we needed to do things to protect ourselves or to strengthen ourselves from that sort of broader. And like we're at this place now. A couple of years ago, it was a little bit bold to say like the words white supremacy, but
yeah.
But we've kind of gotten to this place where we, it's a little bit more accepted to be able to use that term. And regardless of how intentional or unintentional it is, there was this permeating American culture. And so you could just see it like people talk about California as being like not a segregated place the way that the South was, but they had sundown towns like Bakersfield, California, where like Black people were supposed to be out of town before sun went down.
Right.
And they have signs that say no dogs, no. Yes. So my mom had these experiences. She wanted to make sure I saw the truth of that, and that I would then be able to protect myself and to empower myself in this space. So like, I'm from the generation of people who code switch. And I mean, we all do it to a certain extent, but I feel like it's becoming less necessary as our community is proving its worth in its authentic self and not having to change the way that we speak in certain spaces as much. But I did grow up code switching because that was the thing that mom was like, you go into these spaces, you have to be able to present yourself in a way that will allow you to have some power in negotiating. You go to the doctor, you want the doctor to actually listen to you and understand your symptoms and understand that you are actually feeling pain and not dismiss you because of the way you talk. So all these sorts of different ways of having to be this sort of dual consciousness that you have to have going from one space to the other was part of like the personal lessons that my mom was trying to, she was trying to arm me and put armor on me so that I could go out into this world and be safer and be more successful. And it's unique to the diaspora in these predominantly white spaces to have to navigate this kind of stuff. So in America, we're the place that, really crystallized race and racism for the rest of the world.
Yeah. And
so that's why it seems like it's the worst here, is because we innovated. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. But yeah, that was my experience.
Ella, what about you? I
would say my experience was very similar to Pierre's in that, growing up, excellence was something that not necessarily always talked about. My parents always pushed education and going to school and, learning and all of that. And I feel like excellence they never actually said that we want you to be this, we want you to be that. I think that's part of the blessing that I had. Like my parents didn't specifically push that on me. It was more of what I saw from society. being Nigerian, there's the stereotype that you're either a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or you're a disappointment. And so, you know, having that being in the air, me going into a creative space, like people don't, to this day, I think a lot of people I know don't understand what it is I actually do.
Yeah.
As a strategist in the advertising industry, which is fine. But at the same time, is what was ingrained in me is the sense of like, you know, whatever you're going to do, be the best at it. I think that was the mindset that you know has fueled me, regardless if I wanted to be a janitor or if I wanted to, you know, be someone who's you know, taking care of horses. Just be the best at whatever that is. And I think, you know, that's been the mindset that's been fueling me. But at the same time, it does cause a lot of stress and lead to the sense and the need to be perfect, because you know you do hear the phrases of like, you have to be 2 times better than this other person because you do look a certain way, you are a person of color, so you have to prove your worth, you have to prove XYZ. And in my life, I've struggled with that a lot, because you know perfectionism is a problem. I feel like there are a lot of Black people, Black women who deal with that, and to their own personal detriment. And I think I'm only just getting to a place in my career and in life where I'm realizing that like perfectionism is unrealistic, and all I can do is the best that I can do with what I have, and that I've proven myself enough. So I'm gonna stop trying to do that.
Yeah, amen. Rivka.
Yeah, I think for me, kind of similar to Pierre and Ella, I grew up in a very traditional Caribbean household. And so there are certain things that were instilled in me around just doing well, like that I think is probably just synonymous with like just the way that we grew up and what they come from. I think that the notion was also always that they worked really hard for us to be here. And so we just had to kind of like show, like kind of give them a reason to be proud type of thing. So that was something that I heard a lot. It was something that was really hard for me growing up too, especially because it was such an emphasis on education, on just like, you know, really being good in like all of my subjects that were academic. And I've been a creative since birth. Like I've just always been wanting to dance or wanting to act or wanting to do something in the creative space. And for a very, very long time, up until recently, I didn't know that I can do that professionally. Like I didn't think that that was a real thing. Like I was like, what do you mean? Like that's a thing people are actually doing in real life? Like this is not just like a joke, because it was just something that was instilled in my mind that's just a hobby. People just do that as a hobby. They don't do that as like a real career. I think the positives of it is that you do develop a strong work ethic. And so you kind of have a resilience that is barring none in a lot of spaces, especially as a Black woman. You kind of need it to a certain extent to kind of navigate what we have to go through sometimes. But I think the downside is that it can be kind of like what Ella said, you do it all the time. You don't know when to stop. You don't know when to turn it off, you know, and you look at yourself and the things that you are doing that are incredible. Sometimes you don't even give yourself credit for.
Yeah.
And so it's something that similar to Ella, I'm learning now to be like, okay, you did a lot, you know, like it's okay, you know, it's also okay to rest, you know, learning how to like incorporate mental health, which is something that a Caribbean family that, you know, I was just talking to my dad about a therapist the other day and he was like, therapist, like, you know, so certain things like that. So I think it's definitely been something that, another thing that my dad also kind of like talked about a lot when I was younger was just like the identity of Blackness, but not in relation to his life or our lives, because again, I grew up in Brooklyn, but just understanding like political things, like understanding what was going on in the world. He was very, very into that. And so like watching the news and explaining certain things to me, even when I was younger, I was always kind of aware that there was some type of injustice or certain things that were happening to us and in our communities that were not happening to everyone. And I think that always kind of gave me that hyper awareness growing up of like, just be mindful, just be, you know, understanding of like, things are not the same for everyone in every space. So yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
Jacqueline.
So, like I mentioned earlier, I think, you know, race really wasn't discussed when I was really young. But after my parents divorced and I started approaching my teenage years, I think that's when I started to notice that this pressure to sort of assimilate. And I think it was, you know, it was two things. It was society and, you know, hearing my peers and hear my friends sort of speak about Black people. And also, as I mentioned, my dad. And so I think as I got older, I felt this pressure to sort of, code switch and present myself as more white. And I realized, that I think it was not until a little bit later that my mom started to notice that, insecurities and like, why am I trying to hide myself? And it was really then that my mom started having conversations with me as she like realized that this was an issue, because it was not something that she had never had to deal with before, to just encourage me to like be myself. I know. So for example, especially as you go into high school and college and work, the pressure, a couple people have talked about this, about hair, to straighten your hair. And I, for years, I did not want to leave my house without my hair straight. And I'm just the past couple of years, I finally embraced my mom. I'm watching, and I'm sure she's so happy that my hair is curly today, and that she just hates it when I straighten my hair. She loves my curly hair, and she always tells me. And I'm just glad that I finally gotten to this place where like pressure of society isn't making me sort of understand, isn't driving what my worth is.
Hey y'all, how do we deal with the trauma that we put on, like that we carry? Like some come down from us having to adjust to deal with this society and just dealing with what it means to be Black in this world, in this country, at our places of work. Like, how do we deal with that? I know Ellen and Rivka referenced it, but like, how do you deal with this trauma to take some of that off? Like Pierre, I know you mentioned, you're going to raise your 5-month-old boy a certain way, but are there any adjustments you're going to make in that? Maybe you realize like, okay, some of that was a little too much. Some of that is heavy on my shoulders, and the burden that I carry as a grown man, that I can tweak that and adjust that. How are y'all dealing with that? And what are the conversations like that you're having with friends, yourselves, therapists, so on and so forth?
Lots of therapy. Lots and lots of therapy. For me, it's especially in the last few years, and I have been very vocal about this on my LinkedIn, just in terms of workplace trauma, a lot of it, stemming from my interactions with white coworkers. And, I've spent a lot of time just trying to unpack that, having conversations with therapists, having conversations with myself, and trying to just understand where it all stems from. And a realization that I've come to recently is that, a lot of my trauma comes from, unfortunately, a fear of white people in certain contexts, specifically given the fact that, I've dealt with situations where there have been microaggressions toward me. There have been, blatant and, just subtle things that have happened that, a lot of like gaslighting, things like that. And so I've just got to a place where for me, I have to kind of like give grace, even though I'm not always giving grace, but like I'm giving grace to other people for myself, because if I don't do that, it's just,
where do you get it if you don't give it to yourself, right?
Exactly. So it's kind of one of those situations where it's like I'm teaching myself to give the grace in that sense of like they people who are, I feel, are causing me trauma may not know that they are doing that. So I'm giving grace in the sense of like, maybe you don't know what you're doing. I'm gonna just assume the best in that situation and then just move forward as if it is the best, even if it could be the worst, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense.
I would say that for me, it's about, once again, it's like that thing that my mom always wanted. She always wanted me to see the world as clearly as possible, see things as truly as possible.
Yeah.
And so for me, processing my trauma is about a lot of self-examination, self-reflection, kind of self-storytelling about what my experience is, what I'm going through, but also trying to see clearly the people that I interact with who, like, to speak to what Ella was saying about the trauma that comes from microaggressions, seeing that it's not about me, it's about them, what they're going through, their limited worldview, their socially constructed views of other people, that all that stuff. It's because for me, like, when the trauma hits me when I buy into it, when I believe the whatever negative thing is causing me to feel the way that I'm feeling. And if I see the game, if I'm like, this is not real. This is some stuff that belongs to you and not to me, and all this stuff is on you. Then it can't hurt me the way that it would if I actually bought into it and believed it. So, but that's it's easy to say and it's hard to do, and so it requires a lot of like reflection, self-reflection, self-examination, and yeah, that's I think also enjoying creating and enjoying creative culture. Like there's cathartic stuff that comes out of that, like music. Like I remember how much of a solace Solange's "Seat at the Table" album was for me.
It was therapy for a lot of people.
It was straight up. It was straight up. I should have been sending her money, like beyond just buying for that album. I should have been sending her like money that was my therapist for just anyway. But like things like that, there are things in the culture that help because they sort of reflect back to me that this experience that I'm having is not all. I'm not alone in it. Other people are going through these similar things, these similar stories. And so you can feel a sense of community with people. It's easier to go through something together than it is to go through something alone.
Yeah.
So anyway.
I think to that point, I think for me, the ways that I've been able to kind of process trauma is like community. Community is such a big part of my life, and trying to find people who are like-minded, Black folks, Black queer folks, like that has kind of been my safe space. In addition to a therapist, I think things kind of in tandem help to kind of rewrite certain things and help you unlearn certain things. And also just kind of having someone to be like, yeah, you're not crazy. Like kind of what Ella was saying about the gaslighting. It's like having a space where people get it and people also have those shared traumas, even though that's not super, super healthy all the time. Yeah. But understanding that you have someone to talk to about it and kind of knowing that it's not just you, I think has been super helpful for me. I think another thing is that I've learned boundaries through therapy. And so there's certain spaces I will not be a part of if they do not serve, me as all of me. So
yeah, talk about it.
That's something that I've definitely learned and have been going, strong in, and that's been helpful for me.
Yeah, for me, like my parents always said that you're strong enough to deal with the issues that come your way, kind of like God will never give you an issue that you can handle or problem you can handle. Which looking back, I'm like, wow, that wasn't quite right, because it wasn't until I was in my 30s I met my wife that I realized that, therapy, is an amazing thing, and she stressed that. And my parents never really talked about that. They think that if you go in therapy, you're a weak person. You can't handle, your situation.
Yeah.
But my wife switched my mind, my perspective on that. And she's right. It's like, okay, certain things you have to talk to somebody with, right?
That's right.
For me, the way I process trauma, whether personal or professionally, I create more. I produce music on the side as a hobby. So when I'm really stressed, when I deal with some trauma, I'll create some music. I'll design something different, or I'm also into sci-fi, and one day I actually want to write a script for a sci-fi movie. So I'll start working on my script again. So that's the way I process trauma. Basically, dig myself into my creative self, and then try to find the answers that I'm looking for through my creativity. Sometimes it works, but other times it doesn't work, because certain issues that I'm dealing with, I realize that it's better to talk to a professional instead of trying to,
wrestle with yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
And the thing, I want everybody in the audience to remember: if you haven't tried therapy, it's about getting tools to help you cope. It gives you an outlet, but it's about them equipping us with tools that we can apply in our daily lives to help us cope, help us to get through, help us to process, help us to understand. So I highly, highly recommend it if you haven't tried it. And I know in the Black community, we've heard it from different panelists. It just is something that was frowned upon in our community for a long time, no matter what part of the diaspora that you're from. Jacqueline, I want to hear about how you cope with the different traumas.
Therapy. I think that's been a big thing. Of course, for me, the biggest conversation in therapy is my relationship with my father. And I think, well, for one, I think I like experimented with therapy back in my 20s, I think. And I remember it being difficult to find a therapist of color. And so I would go to like white therapists and they just did not understand like anything that I was trying to talk about. So finally now I've specifically tried, found a therapist who's a person of color who can relate to my experiences. And so therapy has been huge. I think, of course, my relationship with my dad is really challenging. And over the years, when I've tried to address, the things that he's done and said that are hurtful to me, it's, he's very dismissive. He doesn't, just doesn't get it. It doesn't believe it. And that is really, really hurtful to me. And so for another thing, just like Rivka said, it's boundaries. And, I've just had to learn to, it's my father, but I have to set boundaries because I cannot accept that someone in my life who's supposed to show me that I'm valued to just completely not understand why their behavior is so painful and so hurtful. So that's a big thing. And then also community. I think even just in the past month, working with this group right here has been so incredible. And I'm so grateful to all of them. And just making me feel welcome, encouraging me to share my story too. And so community too.
Yeah. I want to ask you, with the few minutes we got left, I want to shift specific about work and about the efforts that we see, the places that we work, WongDoody or other places that you've worked, and just what you're seeing externally too, about the increased efforts around making an open space for Black employees to feel more included. And let's be frank, it was kicked off by the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. And then companies started, wanting to acknowledge Juneteenth because that was an opportunity. It's an opportunity I welcome because you want to give me another day off recognizing Black folks? Cool. How do y'all feel about those efforts? Do you feel that they're sincere? Do you like the strides they're making? It's more of an importance on ERGs, like what we're doing right now with your ERG. How do y'all feel about those efforts? Do they resonate with you at all? And what would you do differently, if anything?
I feel like this has been something that I, in particular, have had such deep feelings about. I had like a podcast I ran over quarantine called All Black Matters that I kind of was talking a lot about this, just kind of the performative nature of a lot of the companies I would work with or just like spaces I would be in because I freelanced for a while. And I felt like it was disingenuous and I definitely feel like it was opportunistic. I still feel that way. But kind of like to what X said, like I just feel like, you know what, let's take this and make it something great, right? I feel like, unfortunately, in this country, that's what Black people have had to do for a long time.
Yeah.
And until we are at the helm, shout out to X for this amazing opportunity that you have, because we're all excited for you. And like things like that, where we are getting to a place where we are now changing the conversation and we are now changing the kind of the ways that things are happening. But also outside of these companies, right? Like maybe starting something from the grassroots and building it up to be something that is inclusive and is led by us and ran by us. I think we're going to just have to deal with this in one way or another. And so for me, like, I think the fact that we have at WongDoody this Black ERG, I think it's important for us to understand our culture and the ways in which we want to interact with one another. Even, kind of putting aside the fact that it's a corporate environment, but just understanding that we are real people, we are humans, and we're going to want to kind of connect in a way that's authentic to our experience, I think changes that whole dynamic, at least for me. I feel like that's what makes it different. Not the fact that it's been put in place in a performative way. And I'm not saying that that's what happened here, but I'm just saying in general. But I think us having that understanding of like, we know why we're here. We understand each other. I feel like that makes a difference. So that's my take.
Absolutely. Oh, it's a wonderful take. Thank you for diving right in on that. I would love to hear from the rest of the panelists, whoever wants to jump in next.
I can jump in. So I would say that my experience at other agencies, I've seen some agencies like actually genuinely want to try, but sometimes miss the mark. And I've seen some being very performative. So it's like a mixed bag there. I would say for me personally, and this is my personal experience, I can't speak for everyone else on the panel, but my experience specifically at WongDoody, I would say it's the first agency I've ever been at where I felt like I represented myself as Ella, not represent, and not I was not a representation of like all Black people. And it was that's really important to me because in my other experiences, I've always felt that I had to be the representative of everyone else. And, when it came to like, ERG things there, I haven't really been a part of an ERG before. I was the ERG potentially like,
right.
like push things forward. And so being here and being in a space where, there's a collective group working together to get to a certain place, it's been really a positive experience for me there. And I feel like, WongDoody in particular, there are so many things that the agency is doing to try to like get to a better place. There's obviously room for improvement, but like the efforts are being made and they're being shown, and that's always appreciated.
If there's a space here for me to jump in. I wear a bunch of different hats at WongDoody. One of them is I'm the co-chair of the DEI Council. And speaking directly to what you were saying when you led this off, Xavier, WongDoody, like so many companies, had an initial response to those traumatic events that sparked kind of a sea change in how companies are trying, whether it's performative or sincerely, to address these long-standing issues. We, as a company, have really, in the last couple of years, gone from sort of good-meaning, well-intentioned, but less planned action to more structured action. And we're making a lot of progress with regard to building structures and doing the actual work that promotes the kind of welcoming, empowering, diverse environment. So that's me with my official hat on. I'm gonna take that hat off and just say that on the real tip, everybody who's working everywhere needs to be trying to figure out ways to call back to the title of this event, to infuse your experience with some of the legacy of the civil rights movement. What kinds of actions can we take in our spaces to promote this stuff? And it doesn't, we don't have to, you don't have to change the world, but we could be thinking about what are the little things that we could be doing. And if we all, get together and lean into this stuff, So if we all get together and focus on this stuff, we can make change wherever we are. And we can push back, and we can, anyway, I'm just saying, we are strong, and we are smart, creative people, and we can make our spaces better no matter where we are. So
that's right. And you're also saying, not to speak for you, Colby, but that it's up to us, and that we do have a responsibility. I do want to use that word. I know we shoulder a lot, and a lot is thrust upon us, but we do, as Black folks, have a responsibility to Black folks in these spaces, and the Black folks that came before us, the civil rights leaders that came before us, our parents that came before us, our ancestors that came before us, and all those that will come behind us, to reach back and pull them in. And when we're in those spaces, make those spaces better. If we see something needs to be done, we need to speak up and we need to say it. Be strategic about it. Be professional. Be yourself. Be your unapologetic, authentic, sincere self. But bring that to the space, because they're not just going to give it to us, and it's not going to last if we don't propel it forward. So, Colby, I'm right there with you, and thank you for that. I just want to hear from a couple more people on this, and we do have a question from the audience I want to get to. So I wanted to say one more. Actually, just jump straight to the question with limited time. So this is from Trisha Iverson. Is that Iverson? Okay, Iverson. Any relation to AI? Never mind. How can we make WongDoody a safe space for you?
The thing is, like Kobe said, to listen to us, right? If we are having like certain experiences, and then we bring it up, to WongDoody, just listen to what we're saying, And in the past agencies that I've been part of, like there was always a fear, for Black creatives, right, to demand or ask, what they're looking for, from the higher ups, right? And the fear was if I say something they don't like it, they're gonna retaliate, I might lose my job, right? So that's why a lot of them stay silent, And what I'm asking, based on that question is, for WongDoody to listen to the Black employees, because what we were talking about is actually affecting us, not only the person actually who asked who's asking us the certain demand or a certain question, but it's actually impacting a lot of other people within the organization that they might not be aware of.
And to add to what you said, Pierre, in terms of listening, but like listening without like judgment or thoughts in terms of like say if a Black employee says something, you're like, oh, that's not my experience, I don't think that this would happen. Like listen despite that. I would add to it, because our lived experiences are valid regardless of if it's an experience that someone else might have or not have. Like if someone is saying something from their lived experience, I think there's validity to it, and to Pierre's point, it should be listened to.
Our lived experiences are valid, and they're also valuable, especially in these spaces that aren't traditionally populated by high percentages of people of color. And so when you have organizations where lots of strategic and creative decisions are made, it's valuable to have access to perspectives that aren't, may not be represented as you move from less diverse to more diverse. So anyway.
Anyone want to add to that before we close out? So what I want to do in closing out is I want to hear from everybody, just some parting thoughts, just about a minute each, just parting thoughts on everything we talked about, and even speak to an action that you're committed to taking to make whatever space you reside in, professionally, personally, in your community, to be a driving force for that change.
I would say, taking a quote from James Baldwin, like not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced, right? So my thing is to speak up more, because I felt like in the past I had some opportunities to actually speak up, to basically change certain things in certain organization. I didn't say anything because I was waiting for other people to say it first. But my goal is to, spearhead, certain things and speaking up. And when I see something's not quite right, for me to basically voice it out, so that, my Black colleagues can benefit from that, and we can move forward to a more, inclusive, space.
I would say that I'm trying, the action that I'm taking, the goal that I have is to be the person I would have wanted to have early in my career. I'm trying to be that person for other people that I see, starting out in their career, specifically like young Black women who, I recognize myself in. And so I'm doing what I can, in whatever small ways that I can, to, if I recognize that they're dealing with a struggle that I face, like giving them advice, and giving them thoughts in terms of like what I did or what I would have done based on the knowledge I have now. So just being that person who wants to like help, like I said, being who I would have wanted when I was younger in my career.
Yeah.
I would say that I, for a long time, have not truly embraced the idea of ambition in my professional life, because I also am a creative person. And for many years, I thought of my professional life as the gig that paid the bills while I pursued or, engaged in my music and in my writing and blah, 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 blah. And the thing that I'm challenging myself is to embrace ambition for the specific purpose of becoming a valuable person in networks and helping other people in the industry. And so like what I realized, thinking about this, is like, if you stay at this particular level, you can't really help pull people in and be a valuable network resource to someone. But if I embrace this idea of ambition and progressing, then I put myself in a position where I can have greater influence on others. So yeah, I think that is my action that I'm committing to.
I think similar to kind of what people were speaking about before. I mean, I'm in resource management, right? So like I kind of have like an HR background. My goal in my career has always kind of been to help others come through the door, especially people that look like me. And I think that, and also being in a place where my voice matters, in in a way. I mean, it always matters no matter who you are, what level you are. But I think kind of being able to have enough experience and exposure to understand what's happening and be able to be a stakeholder, as so to speak, has been something that I think I've been focused on professionally, and also just listening to folks. Not, I know sometimes we understand that we're all different. We're not a monolith as Black people, but sometimes we can kind of be like, oh, well, this person might have this experience. And I think making sure that I'm checking my own kind of biases is something that I think is super important for me in the spaces that I'm navigating now. So I think that's been something that I've been focused on.
I would say this whole experience of putting this series together and working with my colleagues here has been a really impactful experience. I don't think I've ever voiced any of the things that I've said, when today, or when I've written. I've never said it out loud, besides to my therapist or to my very, very close friends. So being able to have the support and the space to talk about this stuff was very freeing. And I hope that it will just be a catalyst to get myself to continue to accept myself. And I hope it encourages other people to do the same. And yeah, I'm just really happy for this experience. So thank you.
No, thank all of you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for trusting me with this as your moderator and host for the event. I learned so much from each and every one of you. So thank you, Pierre. Thank you, Ella. Thank you, Colby. Thank you, Rivka. Thank you, Jacqueline. Shout out to Tariq West, who invited me to be a part of this. Don't forget, you want to check out this playlist put together by the Black ERG here at WongDoody with some additions from me. It's called Shore to Shore, Exploring Our Personal Black History. And there's some bangers on here. I'm telling you, you're going to discover new music. You're going to discover new artists. You're going to hear some songs you already know and love. You can find it embedded on the website. Thank y'all for having me. Please be committed to action, to empowering our community. Speaking your truth, your experiences is one of the most powerful things you can do and bring to your work. Thank you. Y'all be safe. Y'all take care of each other. And look into therapy if you haven't tried it yet. I'm telling you, it's going to give you some tools to help you navigate this life and to shed some of that trauma that we carry based on these experiences. Thank you. God bless y'all. Peace.
Thank you.